the gift of listening. And it is a gift. If that is the greatest gift that we can give each other, is to have a listening for each other. Now, you can pretend that you're listening. You can sit there and, kind of look at them while all the time in your mind you're figuring out what you're going to say as soon as they get through saying what they're saying. So it really takes staying conscious. It's intentional. Listening is to really have a listening for people, and so why why listening is such a gift is because you're present. It's about presence. You're showing up for someone. And it's not just a performance. You're there. You're showing up. And it really slows us down long enough to notice what the truth really is, and it creates safety, especially if you're talking to someone that is wounded. And I have a dear friend on here, Ann Worth, Dr. Ann Worth, and she knows the gift of listening. She is one of the best therapists I've ever known. And that is one of the best gifts that therapists can have, is the gift of listening to people. And then be able to give them some, and well, I won't get into all of that, but it's, what listening is, it's not waiting for your turn to talk, like I said a while ago. A lot of times we just said, well, when are they going to finish? So, because we've got all this going on in our mind that, would be so much better than what they're saying. So it's really about paying attention. And while I was doing this, I was thinking back over my life, in that I was very, very, very shy and bashful. But I learned a technique in how, I guess God gave it to me, and how to be with people. And I remember when I was 13 years old, and of course I looked like a grown woman because I was so morbidly obese. And my mother had a drinking buddy, one of her drinking buddies. She was a very wealthy lady in Odessa, and she was an oil woman, had oil leases everywhere. So she wanted to go to Marfa, Texas. And she asked Mother if I could go with her to ride out there with her. Well, Mother just said yes, whether she didn't ask me if I wanted to go. And I was so uncomfortable going that drive out there. And the only thing I knew to do was to ask her questions. And that started, it started before that. People say today that I don't visit with people, I interview them. Because that's what I do. I ask questions because I'm interested in people. And then it gets the focus off of me. So I want to tell you this little story is she stuck me in this hotel in Marfa. And if you've ever been to Marfa, there's not much there. So we were outside in that restored hotel. But anyway, it was very nice. And it was packed with people coming and going and coming and going. So I had all day to sit there and observe the comings and the goings. And so if there was a lull, I would go ask the woman I'd go talk to the woman up at the desk. I'd interview her. Anyone that came by, I'd interview them. Well, I want to tell you, some of you are old enough to remember this. The people that were in that lobby were filming the movie Giant. And I didn't realize that until it came out. And I saw it when I was older, and I thought I was there. James Dean, I did not get to interview any of them, but they would walk through the lobby there. And which is unusual because most of the time they don't, they'll put them, today they put them in trailers or whatever. But anyway, so I interviewed everybody in that hotel, and I found out all about the filming and how long it was going to take and what is coming out and da 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 da. But I did not know how large that that incident was. And what I learned was just I would ask questions and people would answer. Most people want to tell their story. They are just waiting for a listener. They yearn to tell their story, for someone to be interested enough to listen to their story. And then how you know if someone is listening, and we teach clients this, is to, one of the things, the gift of listening, is to look people in the eye, get engaged, even lean up in your chair a little bit, and really have a listening for them. Oh, I forgot to put on earrings. Anyway, that's sorry. I mean, that ADD comes out. But it's about leaning in, and being with them and having a listening. And then if you want to know if you're really listening to someone, mirror back what they said. Now, we teach people here to mirror back word for word for word to really get them into paying attention to the other person, to have a listening for each other. And if they can start out just repeating every word they hear, then after a while it becomes a habit, because what we have to do, I don't have to, but in the gift of listening, it's like anything else. It's what we think. What we're thinking is how we act, and how we act becomes a habit, and that habit becomes our character or who we are. So if you're wanting to, good listeners are thinkers, are good thinkers. They're not just sitting there waiting for the other person to stop so they can start talking. And it's not interrupting people to tell your own story or to add to their story. And we probably have all been guilty of some of that. I don't know. I try my best. And I've been interviewing the people around me while I'm thinking about doing this listening, and I've asked them, am I a good listener? And if they say yes, well, what makes me a good listener? So anyway, I have had to cultivate that. And I don't do it perfect. But one of the things, there's Jennifer from New Orleans, no, from Baton Rouge. She's my cruising buddy. And there's Vicki from the cruise. Y'all are going to have to go cruising with us sometimes. It's so much fun. So, like I said, I was very shy and very bashful. And I had a hard time talking about myself. So if I could get people to talk about themselves, I was home free because I could have a listening for them. And I didn't know what I was doing, but what I would do, if they would slow down talking, I'd ask them another question. And then I'd ask them another question. My husband, R.L., he said this many, many times, but the first time it happened, he had a friend that he had grown up with, and they'd been close, dear friends. And this was, they were in their 30s when I met both of them. And I don't know where we were. We went somewhere, and Lewis and I were somewhere that we were by ourselves. And I was so shy and bashful being there. I was like 18 years old, and these were grown-ups. And so anyway, I started asking him questions. So later, I was telling R.L. about different things about Lewis. I said, he's fascinating. And R.L. said, what are you talking about? He had never heard of any of the stories that I started telling him. And they'd known each other for years, So it's about having a listening for people. And, I did it out of self preservation so I wouldn't have to talk about myself. And so, whatever works. But people love to tell their story and they love to have someone to listen to them. And then, it's about listening, but it's also about picking out 2 or 3 things that stand out for you and mirror that back to them. I'm hearing you say blah, 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 or I see that you're upset just talking about it. I see that you're upset. You're reliving that. And so it's engaging people and getting them to talk more. And it's not really a gimmick. It is, I think that's a gift that God gave me in that I was interested in people. I've always been interested in people. As a little girl, I wanted to know how they lived. I wanted to know what they ate inside their house. I wanted to know what the color of the walls were. I wanted to know everything. And so all you have to do is ask, and people will tell you most of the time. And so it's about being with someone else, just really being with them. And one of the things, it's like being engaged, looking them in the eye. And I've told this story before, but I was a busy mother, had a house full of kids, little ones, teenagers. We raised 7 together, and I was busy, and that was before dishwashers and all of that. So I remember Kim was probably 6, 7 years old, and I was standing, washing dishes. And she came up to me and she wanted to tell me a story. And I said, well, baby, just go ahead and tell me while mother's washing dishes. And she said, yes, but you're not seeing my eyes. You're not looking at my eyes. And that taught me that to be a good listener, it's about connecting. It's connection. It's about looking at people in their eyes and letting them know that they have your full attention. Did I always do that after that? No, but I was aware of it. And when that awareness would come up, I'd stop what I was doing and turn around and listen to, and look at the kids and listen to them. And I'm sure I didn't do that perfect, but Kim has always been my teacher. Kim's always taught me what to do and what not to do. So anyway, we learn from everyone that crosses our path. So one of the things that a lot of people struggle with to listen is they have trouble with silence. So if there's a lull in the conversation, they get uncomfortable. And sometimes, that is being with each other, just being in each other's presence. You don't have to always be talking. It's about being and allowing the person that you're with just sitting there, just being with each other. But if you struggle with that, and because what happens if you get silent, those feelings will come up, those emotions will come up, and if you really haven't dealt with your past, if you're in a situation and the other person gets silent and then you get silent, it creates an opening for the feelings and the emotions to come up. And so when those feelings and those emotions come up, you might actually act more human, you might even have some tears to come up. And they may have some tears to come up. And you may really have a connection that just talking back and forth doesn't create much of an opening. And a lot of times, most of us don't have a listening for ourselves. We must have a listening for ourselves. You know what I mean by that? And what that means is to have a listening for ourselves. Means is to stop the activity up here, slow down, And when we do that, what we do is we enter the presence of God. But we can't enter the presence of God as long as we are running our mouths and running the show and just trying to, keep up with the conversation. It's about breathing through it and allowing God in and experiencing the process. And that was really hard for me. It was really hard for me because, like I said, I was so shy and so bashful. If someone stopped talking, then I thought I had to fill up the space, and so I guess it really taught me to start talking more. And then, but what I would attempt to do, and this is from an early age, is to engage them, is to get them to talk. And like I said earlier, most people are just waiting for someone to want to hear their story or to listen to them. And I remember, and I've told y'all this, I grew up in Medical Center Hospital in Odessa, Texas. My mother was in and out of the hospital at least every 10 days. I rode the ambulance. Mr. Hubbard, I was on first name basis with him. He owned the funeral home, he owned the ambulance. And I was a regular. They'd put me a bed and a cot thing in mother's room, and I'd stay in the hospital room with her. So the hospital people became like my family. And I wanted to know how those people lived, what they did when they left there, So I got to be like kind of best friends. Of course I did, with the lady in the snack bar. And bless her heart, I think they had a knowing, and I don't think they knew what to do about it. But I think, the janitors, some of the nurses, not the RNs or anything, but some of them just had a knowing that I was a kid that was being neglected and living in a hospital. But this woman in particular, she got to where, she was a girl after my own heart. She knew what time I'd get in from school because I went to school not far from the hospital, and I'd walk to school and walk back. I'd go check on mother, and then I'd go down to the snack bar, and she got to where she would have me a hamburger ready. And I was like Wimpy in Popeye. I loved hamburgers. So she'd have me a hamburger ready. And, and I would eat that. And that was almost like, I'm just going to choke up and cry over that. But it's almost like a kid coming home from school and their mother's having cookies ready or something. And I want to say, my mother would have done that if she could have. My mother was very ill with the disease of alcoholism. It wasn't that she, didn't like me or anything. She was sick. And I just choose to think that if she could have done better, she would have done better. So God put different people in my life like angels. I look back and think of the angels put in my life that now, in today's time, I think those angels would probably have called CPS, Child Protective Services. I don't even know if they had a Child Protective Services back in Odessa, Texas, back in the oil boom days. No, they didn't. But today, if a kid spent all of their time at a hospital without any supervision, I would think it would get someone's attention. And I've told this story before, but I guess I like to tell it. But I was a counselor way before I got old enough to be one. And so I'd make my rounds when I'd get home, get to the hospital home from school, and I'd go see the people all of the different ones that I'd met. And there was this elderly man down the hall from Mother, but I made all the halls, but he was on the hall that Mother was on. And they had him tied down. He was constrained. And he was an old man, probably my age today. But anyway, I'd go in there and talk to him, and he'd want to hold my hand, I'd hold his hand, and he said, "Will you untie me? Untie me." I felt so sorry for that man, so sorry for him. And so one day he gave me a telephone number and he said, "This is my son's number. Call my son." Well, I did. A little kid, I mean, I didn't call one time. I just kept calling. Well, come to find out, he was kind of a highfalutin lawyer there in town. And I mean, it was late that evening, or one evening. I've been calling 2 or 3 days, but anyway, and I was so mad at him because he wouldn't come up there and untie his son. And so one evening he came up there and he wanted to know who the kid was. Anyway, the nurse came and got me, and he visited with me, and he tried to explain to me about how sick his father was, and if they didn't restrain him, he would run off, and that he would hurt himself, and all of that, and all that didn't make much sense to me, and I just thought he was being mean to him, you know. Now, that's when my bashfulness would go take the back burner, because I would stand up for other people. And anyway, I so wanted him to do something about his father. But anyway, it's things like that that I had a listing for that man. I listened to that man, but didn't only listen, I acted and got myself in trouble. But anyway, so listing in recovery is foundational for the 12-step program. Do y'all know that? That is how this 12-step program began, was about listening. And now Bill W., you know, he pretty much loved the sound of his own voice. He could talk. He had no problem about talking. And he, you know, had that spiritual experience, that flash of light spiritual experience. He wanted every drunk to have it, and he thought that every drunk would have it. He didn't know. So he went out, and that was his mission, was to convert the drunks with, you know, tell them what God had done to them. And he'd bring them into their apartment, him and Lois, you know, and Lois would cook for them and all. And but then they'd go back out and get drunk, and so he wouldn't talk to Dr. Silkworth about it. He said, "I'm doing this and all that he was doing for those other drunks." And Dr. Silkworth said, "Well, what are you saying to them? How do you talk to them?" And he said, "Well, I tell them what happened to me in that room, and how I saw a vision, how God spoke to me, and he took my drinking problem away from me." And Dr. Silkworth is the one that gave us this. You know, we're taught to tell our stories about how we used to be, what we were like, what happened to us, and how we are today. Dr. Silkworth, a non-alcoholic, he's the one that gave us this. He said, "Bill, why don't you try this? Why don't you go and talk to alcoholics and tell them how bad you got, what alcoholism, they wouldn't even call it alcoholism really then, but what the drug alcohol did to you, what happened to you when you drank, how bad you got, how you lost everything in your life. You tell them your story, and then what happened, that God intervened, and then how you are today." So, you know, when he went to Akron, Ohio, it was right after that. And I don't think anyone could have put this together except God. I mean, he orchestrated this entire thing, you know, and so he got there, the stock deal fell, you know. He didn't want to drink, but he knew, you know, he went into the bar and he just was going to drink a soda, and he thought, "I don't need to be here." So he got $1 worth of nickels, went out to the telephone, and he said, "I need to find a drunk to talk to." Long story short, there was a woman there, Marietta Cyberling, with the Cyberling Tool Company or Tire Company. Anyway, her best friend was Anna. Anna, Dr. Bob's wife was Anna. And that morning they'd had a prayer meeting about Bob's drinking. And here Bill, he had used up nearly all of his nickels trying to find, you know, if you want to find a drunk, call churches, because that's the first place, used to, they still do, they'll go to churches. Now, they don't go for salvation. They don't go for God. They go for money. And so they will get with preachers not knowing anything about alcoholism, will give them money to eat on, but they don't use that to eat on. That's why my new mission in life is to educate preachers. I mean, I'm speaking in churches to anyway. So, anyway, Bill had that information. Marietta set up a meeting for Dr. Bob and Bill. And Bill, Dr. Silkworth was at his head, and when they met, Bob had already started drinking that day, and he agreed to meet with Bill, but he said, I'll give him 20 minutes. Doesn't that sound like a drunk? I'll give him 20 minutes. Arrogant, and there was nothing arrogant about Dr. Bob when he was his real self. He was reports that he was one of the sweetest, most dear people in the world. But he was going to give Bill 20 minutes. And they went into the library. And Bill remembered what Silkworth told him. And what he did, he started sharing how bad he got at his alcoholism. And then how God had intervened. And he had that spiritual experience. And what he was doing, he said, I need you more than you need me. He told Bob, you're helping me stay sober today. I need you more than you need me. So they created a listening for each other. Now, Bob kind of thought that he might have that spiritual experience. And this is all in God's plan. And because very few, I've been in this business almost 49 years, almost 50 years. And when I was working with strictly alcoholics and drug addicts, I probably have seen maybe 10 people that have had that flash of light spiritual experience. Most of them have, or most of us have what Dr. Bob had. And that is an awakening, a spiritual awakening, that slow educational type of awakening. They don't drink, and they suit up and show up and do what, they listen. They have a listening for sponsors. Sponsors share their program with them. And, that's how the program works. And so Dr. Bob, for 2 years, Bob wanted to drink. He wanted to drink every day. And but what he did, he would work he was a doctor, and he'd work, and then he would go out and he would find a drunk to work with. And I had the opportunity, and Ian probably has, I don't know if Jeff has met him, but anyway, Scotty, Dr. Bob's son, was a wonderful Al-Anon. And I've heard him speak several times, and he said he would always know when he walked into their house that there was a new drunk, that he would be sleeping in the little house in the back, because they take his room to detox people. And he would walk in and he could smell, and I don't know, he said, I don't think I misheard it. He said they would use formaldehyde to detox them. I don't know if it was the smell or what it was, but anyway, he said he would smell that odor and he knew they were detoxing somebody. And so, how the program works is a listening program. It is sharing and listening, to have a listening for each other. If you have a sponsor, and there are sponsors like this, that love the sound of their own voice, and that they will not shut up, that they talk all the time, you might want to confront them. Or you might want to share with them, or you might want to find you a new sponsor. Because sponsorship is a lot of listening, and then giving just primary, just directions, giving directions. Not directions that they heard about or that they saw somebody else do, directions that they did, what they did to stay sober, what they were doing to stay sober. Not, and then they would create that listing, and they would want to, a good sponsor wants to get the sponsoree sharing. And it's a back and forth interchange like that. It's listening and speaking, listening and speaking. And it's listening without judgment. I think I don't care what I talk about, I wind up on the 12 steps. Because, and I don't intend to do that, that's all I know. That's all that I know that really, truly works. But that is what has sustained the 12-step program, is one addict of any sort sharing with another one, because that's who we hear. We can't hear, when all of my life I would hear things like, well, push yourself back away from the table. All you have to do is put your fork down. All you have to do is stop eating. Well, why are you eating so much? Don't take out so much on your plate. Don't eat seconds. There was a lot of experts around about compulsive overeating before I was ever 10 years old. I was morbidly obese as a little kid. But I'll tell you who I have a listening for is people that have been there. When I was in treatment in LA in '85, there was a woman that came because there wasn't I didn't meet a lot of people in our area here that had taken the disease. This doesn't make me special, it makes me very sick. But there wasn't, I never met a lot of people in our area that ate up to 287 pounds, that ate that much. And I'm short, I'm 5'3". I was bigger around almost than I was tall. So I never really talked to many recovering morbidly obese people. And when I was in treatment, there was this woman that would come every Sunday. And we had a meeting there, but no, we didn't. They took us out for a meeting. But anyway, nevertheless, she came every Sunday. And she would bring a candle. And she would tell her story. And then she also took a candle to every meeting she went to. Because she showed up, they took us to meetings all the time. Her story was that she had eaten herself up to over 400 pounds. And she was about dead. And what she found was a woman that shared her story about being morbidly obese. It's abusive to point out a problem without pointing out a solution. And the woman, yes, pointed out the problem because she had the same problem that this woman had. But she also pointed out the solution, and that solution was Overeaters Anonymous. So she went to OA, this 425-pounder went to OA, and the program she lost her weight. And from that point, to look at her, you'd never know that she had been overweight an ounce. But what she did is everywhere she went, to meetings, and then she'd come to the treatment, she'd bring a candle, and she'd give it to the newest person there. And then she'd have a little lighter. I don't know that she smoked, but she'd have a little, I'm going to say she didn't, she just had it for the candle. But anyway, she'd light that candle and tell them her story. And she'd give it to the newest person there. And that impressed me. That so impressed me. Because she didn't have to do that on Sunday. She could have stayed home and watched football or something, But that's what she did. In order to recover, we've got to give it away to people. We have to give it away. And then another thing, we listen in recovery, but also because that is heart to heart. And heart, when you're talking from the heart, it's not being in a hurry. It's not hurried. You speak from the heart and you take your time. And then another thing is the hardest part is listening to ourselves, listening to our bodies, listening to our emotions, listening to our discomfort instead of numbing it or avoiding it. When we don't listen to ourselves, our behaviors start showing back up. So relapse starts way before we ever pick up. way before we ever pick up. And this is when we need to start having a listening for ourselves and listen to our bodies. And, and when the craving for food, the craving for alcohol, the craving for drugs does not start until the substance is put in the body. People will say, oh, I'm craving this, I'm craving. You can use the word like that, but you don't really crave it till the substance goes in the body. What makes the difference between an addict from a non-addict is up here. It's that mental obsession, an idea that overcomes all other ideas. I've never known a normie to have that. We are special people, those of us that are addicts. We have that mental obsession. Back when my food addiction was active, I could be standing up giving a lecture over there at Shades. This mental obsession, particularly for eating disorder people, it's a lot of times not removed immediately. Sometimes it takes years for it to be removed. I'd be standing up doing a lecture, and all of a sudden I'd think, I wonder what we're having for lunch. And then I would think, well, where's going to be enough? I was always afraid it wasn't going to be enough because I was a volume eater. Now that's the noise that lives in an addict's head. And if we don't spit that out and tell it to someone else pretty quick, we will act on it. So we had to start listening to ourselves and listen to our bodies. People with addictions, and Joe McQueenie, who trained me in the alcoholism field, taught me this. He said, one thing you're going to find with chronic alcoholics, and we didn't even treat drug addicts then because the board wouldn't let us. We could only treat alcoholics. They couldn't understand that alcohol was a drug. This is way back in the early days. We finally talked them into letting us treat drug addicts. But what Joe would say is when you get a chronic alcoholic, when they get sober, you're going to more than likely have someone that's malnourished, or they are going to be overweight, or they are going to have some have some physical illness that has been there for a long time, and it won't show up till they get sober. And so he said, you're going to have to start listening to your clients, and don't just, fluff it off, that, they just want a pill or something. And he's the one that gave me the phrase. He said, have a listing for your clients. Have a listing for them, because they're the ones that's going to teach you about the disease of alcoholism, but they're also going to teach you that the recovery is far more than stopping drinking. The recovery is about rehabilitation of the mind, body, and spirit. So have a listening to ourselves, and then have a listening to God. What happens is God often speaks in whispers, and what that means, he doesn't shout it out. What it means, we need to get still. My favorite verse, and I don't know if my friend Ann remembers this, but I've got it in there on the shelf. She gave me this, a little plaque thing, with my very favorite verse on it. And it is, be still and know that I am God. And then break it down. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. The last one is just learn to be. Be who God uniquely made us to be. Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know. I'm doing it like this because this is how it's written on that little plaque. Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Thank you, Ed. I ought to see that every day. So, the power of silence is what I'm talking about. Sometimes silence can never be, just remember this, silence can never be misquoted. Sometimes the less said better. because it comes back to me not as much as it used to. Well, Teddy said, well, Teddy told me, well, Teddy did, said this, so kind of be careful what you say. Silence it can be very powerful, and wait until till you really know that what you're saying, that you're not, that it's not just coming from your head, that it's coming from your heart. Silence shows reflection. Silence shows emotional regulation. New people a lot of times can't be silent. They can be silent, but they want to be around. They got to have some activity. They got to be doing something. I'll never forget, I was down at a treatment center in South Texas. I went down to do a workshop on eating disorders, and had a brand new car that my husband had got me. This was back in his drinking days, and he'd get drunk and buy me something nice. But anyway, he bought me this new car, and I drove it down to La Hacienda, and went in and did that all-day workshop, and I came out, and the car wouldn't start. It doesn't do very good to leave the key on. And not only did I leave the key in there, I left it on. And so the battery was down. Well, there's this guy there that I guess he was coming off a speed or something, I don't know. But if you want action, you get around a bunch of new addicts, and they all are experts in whatever the problem is. Before I knew it, he had scooted up under that car, and he was putting wires together and all. Then he'd jump in the car, and anyway, he got the car started. And I don't know why I thought of that, but it's. I just thought it was funny, I guess, but it just popped into my mind. So, practicing the gift of listening is a gift. To have a listening for each other. And that means pause before responding. A lot of times we'll just pop off something, just off the cuff. Pause. You might even take a step back. And then another thing, and I hope Kim's not listening to this, because the next thing I want to say is put your phone down. Now, Kim and I are great buds, and she lives on the property here. It's our property, our family's property. And so we have dinner most nights together, and then we'll watch TV together. If she can turn it on, I can't turn the TV on. Nevertheless, we watch TV together. And then I'll sit and scroll on my phone. I'll look at my phone, and I can tell you every word they're saying in the show. I have ADD. I can listen to him and her and them and this and that, and the birds outside. I can hear it all at one time. That aggravates Kim to death. She'll be talking to me, and I'll be looking at my phone. Mother, put your phone down. And I need to. She's right, because that is a distraction. And what it really says loud and clear, that's not the statement that I want to make, but I'm sure it's interpreted as that phone's more important than I am, or that phone's more important than what I have to say. Now, I want to tell you, she does it to me too, so we do it to each other. But the phone business can be an interruption in family life, and I won't get into all of that, but y'all know. So put the phone down, make eye contact, actually breathe between. Don't just be sitting and waiting for someone else to that they're talking. You're just waiting for them to stop so you can start talking. Just take a breath. Just breathe, and take in what your friend or your partner said, and reflect back on what you hear. And I love this, because this is what I love to do, is ask gentle questions. I'd like to say all of my questions are gentle. They're not. Sometimes, look at Cam, you say, sometimes my questions can be, I guess, invasive. I don't know. Uh, but I love to, my friend Misty says I interview people. And, we were talking, I hear this every day. She'll be telling me about something. I said, well, what do they say about so and so? Well, what are they doing about so and so? Well, so she said, mini. I did not give them the mini interview because that's what I do. I give them the mini interview. And it's not that I'm nosy, I'm interested. I love to know what's going on with people, but I also like to know what's going on in their mind, I don't know, I just love it. I love to listen to people, and I love to hear what they have to say. I want to know how they're living. And anyway, I've just had that since I was a kid, and I'll probably have it till the day I die. When those hospice nurses are in here taking care of me, I'll probably be asking them questions till I take my last breath. How long have you been married? Well, how long have you been divorced? Well, what caused the divorce? Well, did you get any marriage therapy? Did you think about marriage therapy? Well, what about your kids? I mean, that's the type of thing that I do. Okay, so allow silence without rushing to fill it up. Listening is a skill that we practice. We have to practice. Like if you want to play the piano, you must practice the piano. If you want to be a good listener, you're going to have to practice listening. Be still and know that He is God. There is a God, and it's not any of us. So, the closing thought, you don't have to listen perfectly, only honestly. Just have an honest listening for people. Without judgment. It's not your place to judge you. There will be a judgment day. It's not our place to do it. Now, you might have a little bit of an opinion, but keep it to yourself. It's not about judging people, but I don't know, I'm just full of myself this morning. So when we listen well, we love well. Love is about listening. This gift of listening changes relationships. It changes relationships, it changes recovery, and it changes us. If you want to get better in recovery, create the possibility of listening. And how you know that you're hearing someone is you can mirror back what they're saying. If you don't think that's hard, you come here and be a client. Well, nearly all of you have been. Because we have people say, now what did you hear them say? What did you hear them say? You do this in Family Week, and that's what we teach. It's about slowing down, have a listening for each other. And when you're really listening to someone, you can mirror it. You don't have to mirror it back word by word, but pick out something that they said and mirror it back. And I don't want you to hear that I'm bragging on myself. I'm not. But I do have a pretty good memory. I can't remember what I had for supper last night, but anyway, I was talking to someone, and I can't remember who I was talking with, but it was a couple of days ago, and I haven't seen them, haven't treated them in years, and it might be one of y'all, I don't know, but it's been years. And no, it was a man, and he was sharing something about his child that's grown now, and he was giving me an instant, and I said, yeah, and she was about 5 years old. He said, how do you know that? And I said, because I worked with you. And Ann's shaking her head. I mean, we have a listening, and then it just kind of goes in, and, when the appropriate time, I'll tell you, that was a gift to that man. I didn't intend to give him a gift, but for me to remember the age of his child when something happened, that was a gift to him, because what that said to him, I was important to Tenny at that time. People want to feel the importance. They want to know that they matter to people. So if you want people to know that they matter, have a listening for them. And that's what I'm going to have for each of you right now, because I'm going to turn it over to you, and I've taken up nearly all the time. But who would like to share about listening, the gift of listening?